One nuclear weapon.
President Muhammadu Buhari urges agricultural production to meet the needs of the African continent. India formally invites Nigeria to attend the 2023 G20 summit in New Delhi, plus calls for more gun control in the United States following deadly mass shooting in California. These are just some of the major highlights on the program Global Update this week. Do sit back as we bring you up to speed with developments around the world. I am Abdul Salam Jubril. Welcome. Our first port of call is in Dakar, Senegal, venue of the second edition of the International Conference on Agriculture, where President Muhammadu Buhari tasked African leaders to demonstrate political will and recommit themselves to massive agricultural production to meet the needs of the continent and export surpluses.
The conference, organized by the African Union Commission, the government of Senegal and the African Development Bank, has as its theme, Feed Africa, Food Sovereignty and Resilience, coming at a time when Africa accounts for a third of the 826 million hungry people in the world, coupled with a rising inflation globally due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The high-level summit seeks to extract firm commitments on eradicating hunger on the continent by the year 2030.
I therefore applaud of the African Development Bank to launch the Subsahel Agro-Industrial Processing Zones. The Subsahel Agro-Industrial Processing Zones are game changers for the structural transformation of the agricultural sector. We must ensure that we feed ourselves today, tomorrow, and well into the future. To feed Africa, we need younger male and female farmers. So the future of agriculture in Africa will depend on getting more youth into agriculture. That means we must make agriculture attractive for them.
The African Development Bank will commit $10 billion in the next 5 years in direct support of the Food and Agriculture Delivery Compacts. Let us end hunger and malnutrition in Africa. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our continent. We owe it to the world. I say it again, the moment is right and the time is now. Let's just do it. Let us develop with pride.
India formally invites Nigeria to attend the 2023 G20 summit, scheduled to hold in September this year. This was at the country's 74th Republic Day celebrations that was held in Abuja.
We have excellent political, economic, trade, people-to-people contact relations, wonderful. Trade is one of the stronger points, obviously, as you told that I had already mentioned about it. Capacity building is the second area in which we are very strong. And right from 1964, we have been offering various scholarships to majority of our Nigerian friends. And I'm happy to say that many thousands have actually availed of it also. Capacity building, scaling up of skills, these are some areas in which we are cooperating very well. Defense is a new area where we can look at the possibility. We recently had, under capacity building itself, even in the security side, we had a group of about 30 law enforcement officers go to India for a special training. So we have been doing this very well. As I had mentioned, India had started its diplomatic ties with Nigeria 2 years before your independence. The government of India, even at that point of time, and we continue to even today, recognize the potential of Nigeria. You are the giant of Africa. You and I are more or less equal in various fields. We are equally multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multicultural people, large populations, and the largest GDP in Africa. So it is but natural that India would be inviting Nigeria as a special guest during the presidency of India's G20. And see, Global South, we are partners in G77, NAM and other things. We are part of the Global South. It is very important that the voice of the Global South is also heard. And that is why my Prime Minister had organized the Voice of the Global South Summit virtually, in which, as I told, we are very happy that His Excellency Mr. Muhammadu Buhari, the President of Nigeria, had also participated and expressed his views. Our idea is to bring in the viewpoints and the prerogatives and the perspectives of the emerging economies to the policy-making table. That is the reason why we are doing it. Through you, I would like to thank your viewership and for the friendship that Nigeria has been offering to India. Namaste, namaskar, thank you very much.
Well, you know, India has been a senior sister to Nigeria. They got their independence in 1950, or even 48, I would say. And we learned a lot. And their independence, the independence of India, which was a British colony, inspired many African nations to seek for independence, even though it came some many years after. So Nigeria has learned a lot, and you can see many of our military officers are trained in India. And it's been a good experience for us, and we share so many common things. Besides trades, education-wise, so many Nigerians trained in India. Like I said, the military, both the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, they were all trained in Indian military institutions, you know? So many other things, culturally too.
And we have areas of history. India is pivotal to the progression and genetic development of Asia as a whole. Thus, as Nigeria is fundamental to the historical evolution of Africa, the historical heritages of Africa, and the historical development of economy, foreign relations, and politics in Africa. So Nigeria is pivotal. And then secondly, Nigeria and India are very, very strategic when you come to the issue of third world development, when you come to the issue of G20 countries, when you come to the issue of non-aligned countries, when you come to the issue of countries that are at the middle of global politics, diplomacy, and economy. Nigeria and India, they have a lot of things in common. They have population in common. They have culture, history, tradition in common. They have a historical bond when it comes to issue of trade, when it comes to issue of bilateral political relations. You can remember the High Commissioner said that the diplomatic relations between India and Nigeria started in 1958, which is far earlier than even Nigeria got an independence. So right from the time of the First World War and the Second World War, at the war of international fight on behalf of our mother country, then Britain, Nigeria and India were at the same page. Therefore, Nigeria and India, they are two giants of two continents that, definitely speaking, the world cannot ignore in all ramifications. Nigeria cannot stay in isolation. The G20 summit between the 9th and 11th of September holding in India, and India is the one that is going to chair it. It is very, very strategic for Nigeria to push and advance issues of its own indigenous technology, its own indigenous economic evolution, its own indigenous evolution of culture, history, and tradition. So that with the return of the artifacts from Europe and other things, it is a very, very important platform on which Nigeria will be able to showcase its own historical relevance in world affairs, in world economy, in world politics. It is therefore very, very important, especially Nigeria that is is striving to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council and indeed one of the global power blocks. It is very important. If Nigeria is not there, Africa is not there. And this particular celebration is very, very important.
Let's head to South Africa now, where the country's power cuts has worsened as struggling state utility Eskom said it would extend its worst ever outages until further notice. The power cuts has been affecting businesses in the country, particularly the poultry industry.
Chicken is the cheapest and most loved protein in South Africa. But that may soon change as frequent power cuts make it harder and more expensive to produce. Supply to fast food restaurants in particular is being choked.
The problem is that we can't get them over the hurdle of being slaughtered and get into the supply chain. The chickens that we currently produce have been on the floor for too long. They've consumed more feed, they've grown bigger, and those portions are not the portions that the quick service restaurants would like.
The spillover effects reach far across the sector. Grudge spending on diesel power generators are eating into the bottom line for retail outlets like butchery chain OBC.
Sometimes you try and plan around certain stages, but other times it just catches you. All of a sudden you've gone up to stage 5. Now you haven't planned, but it's having an adverse effect on all our franchise business because people are having to invest more money in fuel to keep their stores running.
Consumption has dropped by at least 20,000 tons in the last 3 years as shoppers battle to cope with rising food costs. That could drop further with prices set to spike again.
We've also seen a material increase in price during the period 2021-2022, but that was caused by the increase in the price of maize and the increase in the price of soybean meal or feed. We have also calculated that load shedding is costing us 75 cents per kilogram. Now, the only way a producer can pay that is to recover that from the consumer.
Companies, meanwhile, are holding back on vital investment to grow industries and create jobs so desperately needed.
We've actually forsaken opportunities where we feel turnover might not justify the investment. And where before, where there was consistent power, you'd say, okay, it's worthwhile going in and building that business over a few months. Now we just rather walk away from it.
The poultry industry is looking at ways to mitigate the impact of load shedding, which includes investment in better technology and energy resources. The energy crisis has, however, sparked concerns over job losses and food security, not just in the poultry industry, but across the entire agricultural sector.
Now in Uganda, experts have stressed that the impacts of COVID-19 has worsened the country's educational divide. Recall that Uganda enforced the longest period of school closures globally during the coronavirus pandemic.
Azaria's school is on holiday until February. Until then, his mother, Diana, is helping her 9-year-old son get his math homework done.
You know, when you're parenting, it's different. And when you have to be the teacher as well, it is really challenging. Because now you have to look through their books, you also have to be on the same page that they are on.
Kasasa Ayeha runs the children's home. The COVID-19 pandemic affected her earnings. The children she takes care of have been in and out of school for most of last year. There's not enough money to pay for their education.
It really affects them in the way that they really miss school so much and they're in a dilemma not knowing whether they'll ever go back to school.
Access to education is getting more difficult in Uganda. According to experts, family economic status is important in the attainment and completion of education. They say the gaps between the rich and the poor are leading to increases in education inequality. The 2021-2022 Global Education Monitoring Report suggested that 30% of families in Uganda now have to borrow to afford their children's education.
By the time children have finished a cycle of secondary school, parents technically have no money to pay for the apex of the pyramid. And in the way things are going, it means that this effort at the base of the pyramid almost comes to nothing.
education outcomes for learners have some way to go.
The children in those spaces may be able to read a few words, but practically they are unable to master the real skills in counting, the real skills in reading, and most importantly, life skills. So that means there is still a lot of work to do within that direction.
The government is planning on increasing investment in public education in its National Development Plan, Uganda Vision 2040. A new education policy review has been established to look into what needs to be done differently. That could give Kasasa's little children another chance of going back to school.
Let's head to Northern Africa, where Egypt is aiming to attract over 30 million tourists annually by 2028. The country says it needs to invest some $30 billion into tourism to grow the sector between now and 2028.
Egypt is home to around 2/3 of the world's monuments, a vast desert, scenic beaches, and also has warm weather all year round. Yet the number of tourists remain well below expected levels. In pre-COVID 2019, 13 million tourists visited Egypt, while nearby Turkey attracted over 41 million. Tourism accounts for 20% of the hard currency that Egypt earns. The government wants to attract 30 million tourists a year, which experts say will require huge investments, especially in constructing hotels to meet the expected hike in demand.
The empty residential apartments in different cities should also be given licenses to transform to hotel apartments to receive more tourists.
Officials are trying to expand beyond the traditional cultural and beach tourism circuits.
We have to fill the agenda with sports events to be hosted in different cities, and that will attract a lot of visitors worldwide. We're stressing on conferences tourism, yacht and golf tourism, which are important because they attract luxury tourists.
A global marketing campaign is also in the works and is to be launched soon. China's lifting of the COVID-related travel restrictions recently has given a major boost to the government's efforts to achieve its targets. The first group of Chinese tourists to visit Egypt in 3 years has already arrived in the capital, Cairo. About 500,000 Chinese tourists visited Egypt in 2019, and industry players hope this number would double in 2023.
New regulations are in place for Chinese tourists to enter Egypt without visas. Although currently they account for only 6 to 7% of total tourists, Chinese tourists have strong purchasing power because the number of nights per person exceeds 15 nights, while other nationalities stay for up to 10 nights only.
Achieving the 30 million tourists target is essential if the state is to generate the badly needed hard currency into the Egyptian economy.
A break beckons, but not to worry. When we return, we shall bring you more stories away from the African continent. Stay with us.
This edition of Global Update on NTA News 24. My name is Oyeyemi Ajayi.
I am Abdul Salah Jibril. Welcome to Global Update. Welcome back. And if you just tuned in, the program is Global Update, where we bring you up to speed with development in the past week. Now, as Californians deal with 2 deadly mass shootings just days apart, President Joe Biden is showing his support behind gun control measures, including renewing the 1994 assault weapons ban he championed as a senator.
The moment it suddenly becomes all too much for the mayor of Monterey Park. Henry Lowe, overcome with emotions as he visited the dance hall that was the scene of Saturday's attack.
I, like many in the community, were just in disbelief, and just, I know I'm just feeling very numb that something like this could happen in our community.
Chen says another of her close friends is recovering in hospital after being shot.
He told me in our brief conversation he was on the dance floor with his students, and another one, very unfortunate, she sat on the corner and then got shot and died.
I know here in California we have one of the strictest gun control legislation, but yet here we are again, another mass shooting, and so something has to be done. We need to stop the violence.
Finally, our hearts are with the people of California. They've been a rough couple of days. I just got back from spending time with Gavin Newsom on the floods and the devastation that occurred, and then on top of that, we see what's happened in California. And what's happened to the Asian American community has been devastating. The Vice President's going to be going out. I've been talking with Gavin Newsom and Judy Chu and Anna Eshoo and Hilda Solis, and we're working out a number of things that we can and are going to be doing. So the bottom line here is that we got a lot to talk about. And yesterday, my buddy Dianne Feinstein introduced her Senate assault weapons ban. I am asking you all to send that to my desk as quickly as you can.
To the Middle East now, where Israel and Gaza militants have traded missiles after a deadly West Bank raid. Since its records began in 2005, the United Nations has never logged such a high death toll in a single operation in the West Bank. Israel launched airstrikes on Gaza in response to militant rocket fire from the Palestinian enclave as tensions rose following the deadliest army raid on the occupied West Bank in years. Israel said it had carried out at least 2 rounds of strike, targeting Hamas Islamists following waves of rocket launches towards southern Israel. There were no reported injuries on either side, and most of the Gaza rockets were intercepted by Israel's air defense system. No Palestinian group in Gaza has claimed responsibility for the rockets. The bloodiest day in the West Bank in years erupted during a raid on the crowded refugee camp in the northern city of Jenin, where gunshots rang through the streets and smoke billowed from burning barricades. The military said Israeli forces came under fire during a counter-terrorism operation to apprehend an Islamic Jihad terror squad and shot several enemy combatants. Since its records began in 2005, the United Nations has never logged such a high death toll in a single operation in the West Bank. Well, on a lighter note, drones light up skies across China for the country's Lunar New Year celebrations. Much of the festivities involves visiting temples and burning sticks of incense to please traditional Chinese deities and bring good fortune for the months ahead.
From traditional architecture to calligraphy and animals, residents and tourists in China have been enjoying intricate drone-based light shows that are illuminating skies across the country for the Spring Festival. As if by magic, hundreds of lit drones form images and patterns that seem to come to life. Together with fireworks and live performances, the aerial illuminations are wowing visitors from near and far.
It's stunning to have both a drone flight and firework display here. We can feel the thriving development of our country's science and technology while watching the show, which is woven with modern technologies and elements of traditional culture. It's very impressive and well arranged.
As locals, we are overjoyed to have such a spectacular light show right on our doorstep.
The Chinese New Year or Spring Festival started on January 22nd this year. According to China's 12-year zodiac calendar, 2023 is the year of the rabbit, which symbolizes longevity, peace, and prosperity.
And that's it on Global Update this week. Join us same time on the same station for another interesting episode of the program. I am Abdul Salam Jubril. Many thanks for watching.